Started, everybody? Cool. So was there dinner, or we just keep going? NDC all night long, is that what's going on? There were snacks, and now we're going to talk some more. All right, well, I'll try to keep you, won't take too much out of your dinner time. And John Skeet and I are going to Aladdin afterwards, so I have a reason to get out of here fast. Woohoo, thank you. Okay, cool. Is this being filmed? Do we know? Oh, that's too bad. You'd be more frank if the camera, just fell over accidentally and suddenly recording didn't happen. Yeah, no one will know. Cool. All right. Well, I'll try to be as frank as I can because I try to keep it real. I want to talk about what an open source Microsoft framework looks like, about what we've done and what we're doing. And again, if I get anything wrong, because Damien's not in the country anymore, it's entirely my fault. If I get any of the messaging wrong or the technical stuff wrong, John Skeet's taking notes about what I get wrong. And he's actually going to slack that over to Damien and say, well, Hanselman was close, but he got this part wrong. A lot of the stuff's my opinion, and it is all a little bit oversimplified. But I want to give you some context about how we should think about ASP.NET Core and .NET Core. Who is doing .NET Core right now for money? All right, cool. And did you do it through the various and sundry release candidates that we've had? Yeah? You pretty excited about that? No? Not really feeling it. All right. Let me explain a little bit of stuff about that in my terms, in the best of my ability. So did anyone start it when it was ASP.NET 5? A couple people? Any people here who know nothing about ASP.NET Core, they just know that it's a thing and it's coming and they came here to learn about it? All right, cool. And the rest of you are just too tired to raise your hands, and that's fine. OK, so let's do real talk right now. We came up with this thing called ASP.NET 5. It seemed like a really good idea because 5 is greater than 4.6. That's really why we called it that. And but we have to think about the context. And this is the kind of stuff that doesn't fit in a tweet. And I say this because I feel that people have a tendency to take multiple years' work by multiple dozens of people and condense it into a mean tweet and or subtweet. And you forget that things are complicated, life is complicated, organizations are complicated, technical decisions are complicated, and your subtweet is not appreciated. Notice how I'm actually subtweeting you right now. You're like, is he talking about me? I probably am, but you'll never know because there's a subtweet from stage. Seriously, though, people say oh, it sucks, .NET Core, they're idiots, what the hell are they doing? Things happen, organizations happen. Let's talk about what happened. What does the org look like? You may or may not know these things. You know that there are 3 Scotts between me and Satya. And we're all just interchangeable Scotts. Scott Hunter, whose name isn't even Scott, it's Carl, owns ASP.NET. He owned ASP.NET. And who did he work for? He worked for Scott Guthrie, who worked in Azure. Okay? That makes sense, right? The web framework runs under the web thing at Microsoft. And then we went off and we said, yeah, it's going to be awesome. We're going to make ASP.NET 5. Where is .NET then? Well, they're over in DevDiv with Soma. Remember Soma? And people under there who we don't know, who do Visual Studio, because they don't come out in the light. And then we've got then we got Richard Lander and the folks that are doing .NET. And I'm just putting one name by that, but there's lots of cool people that you've all heard about. But what's interesting about this is that we have 2 different divisions, and we've got the web framework over there. So in this org chart, we have a situation where ASP.NET is a customer of .NET, right? We are kind of upstream or downstream, but we are in a vector away from .NET. So organizationally, that's interesting. .NET gets finished, and it gets thrown over, and then ASP.NET sits on top of it, and we go and we write stuff. Okay? So we go and we make ASP.NET 5, and it's going to be awesome, and we do stuff like this. You know what I mean? And it's like dn, lp, cz, str, string. We're using Polish notation for that one. That's an old C++ joke that no one gets. So we make those utilities, but the significant aspect of this was, if you remember in ASP.NET, when you got early on, you'd say File, New Project, and there was an ASP.NET 5 console app. John Skeet goes, You did go like that. It was kind of a Grover / Yoda kind of a. And then that was weird, right? And that was where you would have a console app and you'd type, DNX or whatever to run the thing instead of foo.exe. There was a different host. And then that begat, as these things do, a class library, which was the ASP.NET 5 class library, which then kind of virally starts to become a problem. But it's not a problem if this org holds. It makes total sense, because we weren't making .NET Core. We were making ASP.NET 5. And it made sense. And it would run cross-platform. It would work on Azure, and everything was great. So then two things happened that changed things. One of them you know about, and one of them you may not know about. What are the two things that happened? Massive, earth-shattering stuff. We bought Xamarin. I found out about Xamarin being bought when I read it on TechCrunch. Because that's how M&A works. That's how mergers and acquisitions work. They don't tell anyone, because if it gets out, then it won't happen. I also found out that we were buying LinkedIn when Scott Guthrie added me on LinkedIn. True story. And I went, I wonder if he's looking for a gig. What's going on? Do you need a recommendation, Scott Goo? I'll recommend you. It's all right. You can use my network. I'm excited to add you to my professional network at LinkedIn, Scott. And then like 20 minutes later, so then I imagine in my mind, this probably is not how it happened, I imagine like Satya and the LinkedIn guy and Guthrie, like teaching Guthrie to sign up for LinkedIn, and they're holding his hand as he, one finger, because that's how bosses type, and he signs up. Oh, I'm on the Facebook now. Who should I add as my friend? Oh, it's Hanselman's outdated profile picture. Let's go ahead and we'll pick that guy. And then I'm at home, like, with Cheetos and Netflix, and Guthrie wants to be my friend on LinkedIn. So that happened. Xamarin, you knew about that. Then what else happened that was also massive and earth-shattering? Reorg. Game of Thrones.net. Red Wedding, it was awful. Soma's retired. He's gone. And then now Julia Lewson is in charge over there. And then we've got John Montgomery, who's lovely. John Mont, we call him. And then there was like an arm wrestling match, and they needed to have a Scot. He's the Scot that won. And what they did is they said, where does ASP.NET go? Because now we've got Mono and .NET and this weird ASP.NET 5 thing, and it's all, so where's it going to go? ASP.NET really belongs over here. So then they fight, and it's like a Pokemon thing, and rock, paper, scissors. So now Scott Hunter runs ASP.NET and .NET all up. So Scott Hunter becomes the second Scott. He's a lesser Scott. And then Richard Lander runs .NET, and I work under Scott Hunter doing outreach and community. And Azure is still Scott Guthrie, but then he becomes C. He's C and E, right? And I don't know, C is, I thought it was cloud and enterprise, but then someone else said he owns Windows Server, so then it was server and enterprise with like the little umlaut or whatever, the little Frenchy thing, but it's not, it's cloud and enterprise. And then, so then we all serve at the pleasure of the goo. We kiss the ring and genuflect when we see him. But now the .NET starts coming together both organizationally and with these companies, things have to change. Do you know how many different project types there are with .NET? It's like 19. Like legit. Like you start thinking about Unity and Xamarin and all these different things, and then the concept of an ASP.NET 5 class library gets a little confusing, and then you have to ask yourself, well, who's wagging the dog here, right? Is ASP.NET wagging .NET? So what we did is we slammed everyone together, and we had all the architects figure it out. But the mistake was that when we released it, we had this thing called RC1, and it was release candidates are supposed to be release candidates. They are a candidate for release. But then the world exploded, and what was a release candidate was no longer a release candidate. Totally understandable. Funnily enough, I don't think that's a word, that doesn't fit into a tweet, what I just explained, right? life happens, organizations happen, mergers happen, reorgs happen. But the result is you all continue to whine about how it wasn't a release candidate. I get it. It's okay. Yes, we know it was not a release candidate. But the runtime is solid. We've worked out a lot of really interesting problems. And the result is we're going to come out on the other side of this with a .NET that can compete. Who are we competing with? When I go out and teach young people, that's the set of all people who are not you all, when I teach them programming, what do? Hey, kids, we're going to learn Visual Studio and .NET. It's going to be great. First, we're going to download Visual Studio. And then tomorrow, we're going to install Update 3. That's not cool, right? So what are the kids doing? They're going apt install Python, Go, Ruby, Java, well, maybe not PHP, Python, right? I don't know how to spell Python. They're installing everything except .NET. Because 0 to 10 is really easy in those things. And I said this 2 years ago, and I'll say it now. apt install .NET, .NET new, .NET run. That's the goal, right? When the kids out there today make application foo, they go Ruby foo, Python foo, they need to go .NET foo. And then C# or F# or VB needs to work everywhere. You need to feel great about it. And it needs to be more fun than Java. It needs to be as fast and as exciting as Go. It needs to have native support, so it'll make things like Go native executables. And it needs to be a great web framework like Node. And we need to compete on a level playing field with open source. And we'll win or we won't based on it not sucking. That is the goal. So we went and we bought this awesome domain, .NET. Of course, I'm giving you like the mysterious secret internal marketing strategy. How are we going to win? We're going to buy a domain, .NET. Can it just be .NET? No, that's not how domains work. Are you sure? Can't people just type .NET and it'll be, no, sir, that's not how it works. You're a manager, stop talking. And of course, we just redirect it to microsoft.com/net. I'm working on that. These things take time. Within another reorg or two, this will probably be /.net. So regardless, .NET, it's awesome. I worked very hard on that. And you can go up here, and you can say download .NET Core, and you get this lovely thing with these 6 different flavors of Linux, which is nice, and Docker, and Mac, and Windows. And you can also go here, which is cool, right? And use Roslyn, and then do that. And you can actually click on the full tutorial here, which is lovely. We're going to try to open source all this and explain how the sandbox works. And you can go in here and say what experience you have, and we'll judge you if you push Java. And then every single one of these samples has a lovely do the work here. So I could actually teach probably 4 to 6 hours of a C# class without even downloading the thing. That's the level of which we're trying to do. We want to get these in code camps and vocational schools and colleges, right? We're going full on. I've got someone working for me full time right now trying to get us into vocational schools and stuff like that. Okay? Is this useful context? Wouldn't it be great if it fit in a tweet? Wouldn't it be great if Google Plus actually was a thing? No, that would not be great. So here's where things go to heck. Sorry. My son is right there. Hello. Here's where things go to heck. This is just, versioning. Versioning's tough. So .NET Framework 4.6 is out. By the way, 4.62 is out. Very exciting. You know what we got rid of in 4.6.2? MaxPath. Yeah, 2016, y'all. Now you can have long file names. Congratulations. There's always something about file names that's messing us up in the .NET world. Do you know what the code name was for .NET before we called it .NET? It was based on COM, right? Not COM+, COM3. I love this. There's a room full of people. I just told an obscure historical .NET joke, and only John Skeet got it. Why can't you name .NET COM3? Because you can't have a file called COM3 because it's a COM port, there's already one. Old people joke, yes. The old people are like, ha ha. The young people are like, I have no idea what he's talking about. How old are we? We're so old that when we make our project JSONs, we go copycon. We type them out like that. Oh, wow, I've already got one in my desktop. You ever use copycon? Copycon, foo.txt, ABC, Control Z or Z. Yeah. Ah. See, that's how we make files. Copy from console. You can't have a file called COM3 because it's the COM port. So that's why we didn't name it COM3. So aren't you happy that we named it .NET? Because it's totally fine to have a folder with the dot in the front of it. Also a joke that no one gets, and that's okay. 4.6 runs on 4.6. ASP.NET 4.6 has web forms, it has MVC and Web API, and work continues. As you can see with ASP.NET 4.6.2, lots of great new stuff. Okay? You take a look at the blog post, there's a lot of good stuff. ASP.NET Core 1.0, this is the message I need to get to the bosses. This is the one weirdness about all of this. Core 1 runs on .NET Framework, which runs on Windows, and it runs just fine. I've got all these customers that are like, well, I don't really know if I need the cross-platform stuff. I'm not really ready to go to .NET Core. We do everything in Windows. Everything's fine. What do I use? Use ASP.NET Core 1. It works just fine. It runs on Windows. It's released. Here's where it gets confusing. It's because ASP.NET Core straddles the full framework and the core framework. People don't know, people don't get, they don't register that this is a new ASP.NET that has been brought down to its core. It's a rewrite at its core, but it can run on either the full framework just fine and do all the great full framework stuff that it needs to do, or it can run on .NET Core. People then say, oh, Microsoft, you're stupid. You always say naming is hard. It's not hard. Just call it Fancy Web, and we'll all just come along. You just give it a new name, right? Don't call it ASP.NET. ASP.NET's got baggage. It's also got 15 years of enterprise customers and multiple tens of millions of people and websites that use it just fine. And if we made a thing called Fancy Web or Web Matrix even, then I'm sure that people would all come along and use that product, wouldn't they? It doesn't work that way. When you have a good name for a product and you don't have the ability to call it Go, or some two-letter noun. Really cool that they could do that, though. I'm amazed that they could actually name the thing Go. You got to call it something like that. So core really made sense. It was brought down to its core. Okay? So remember this. ASP.NET Core 1.0 straddles those things. Okay? Now this was the goal of this, right? To be totally modular, to give a faster development cycle. That means you want to be able to have the benefits of static typing, the benefits of a fast CLR, but the ability to hit F5 and just have that thing work. We want to be able to choose your editors and tools. What's funny about this is it looks like these are all the exact opposite of what a Microsoft Web Framework would do. Like you could probably go through this and say Microsoft of old would do exactly none of these things. We would make it deliberately slow. We would make it so when you hit Control-Shift-B, you have to go to lunch, and you only can use Visual Studio. But it is a totally new Death Star. It is literally like we're all just running around with Stormtrooper helmets on, just trying not to blow up Alderaan again. We have this great Death Star available to us, and we don't know what we're doing. We're just pushing buttons. But I can tell you this. We may be on the Death Star, but we're not evil. Because Microsoft is not organized enough to be as evil as you think that we are. Does that make sense? This is a fact. All right. Now, one of the things that's causing us a lot of problems is that, again, people don't know that Core 1 runs on 4.6, but they also don't know what's supported and what's not and when they should start, because people watch the ASP.NET Community Stand-Up. Who watches that every Tuesday, right? Content free. I don't know why you watch it. They watch the stand-up, and they watch Twitter, and they see all of this drama happening day by day, and it feels like a soap opera. And it stresses them out because things are happening. Because you asked to see what was going on in the kitchen. And now you're not happy when you see how the sausage gets made, right? It's just not pretty. You would never eat sausage if you saw what it looked like when you make sausage. So I tell people, just chill out. Give it a couple of months and then come back and you'll see progress getting made. So Damien came up with this amazing Australian way of looking at how you should think about ASP.NET. And he did it in terms of meat. He says, if you want it well done, which frankly is a waste of meat, you get Visual Studio, you get NuGet, you won't get salmonella, it'll be textureless, but it'll work and you won't die. Medium well, that's when you start getting into CTPs and released betas, right? Medium or medium rare, tastes better, but you have to put up with the potential for, I don't know, death. Things go wrong, you have to understand that you did order the food that way. That's why they have that little warning on the menu, right? Now, did you know, I guess you did know because you all are Australian, that there's a thing that's rarer than rare? Blue. They just smack the cow on the butt and send them out. It's just like, how do you want that cooked, sir? So a good doctor could bring him back. I'm like, I want to look my cow in the eye. I'm like, that is horrible. What is wrong with you? Well, you asked for it, so we will give you the ability to really, cook .NET completely blue. This is where, again, from a classic perspective, people get confused. They buy Enterprise Visual Studio, and then they think that they have to do things that way. I will talk to enterprise customers. Well, I bought Visual Studio. I paid lots of money for it. We have an enterprise support contract for you, and now I have to build .NET from source. What's going on? They'll ask questions like that. They don't understand that there is a continuum. And we even are having trouble explaining it to you all, because you're the advanced hacker types, the difference between supported, allowed, and might be possible, right? So can I run .NET Core on a Raspberry Pi? That's a complicated question. Can you? Should you? Ought you? Should I allow you to? Would you want to? Those are all the kinds of questions. We want to enable a hacker culture around .NET. But we also don't want to find out that someone just went and deployed 10,000 Raspberry Pis without really understanding what was going on, and then now they want support for it. Because we don't currently have support for .NET on a Raspberry Pi, but it's totally possible. Does that make sense? So we need to make that really clear to folks, and we're trying to figure out how to do that. So if you have suggestions or thoughts about how to foster hacker culture, but let people know that as soon as you're off of medium well or off of a go live license, if you in fact die of salmonella, you don't get to get mad at us. Does that make sense? So that's one of the things that we're thinking about around .NET and .NET Core and ASP.NET Core. The other thing that we're thinking about is for the first time, we're going to start going out and talking about benchmarks. So we're going to get in the Tech Empower benchmarks. Have you seen the Tech Empower benchmarks? Tech Empower has these cool benchmarks, and we're going to get in there. Tech Empower benchmarks. They do like different rounds. Round 12 is the current round right now from February. And long tail is long. So I will point out that if you look at these things, this is like the Hello World plain text benchmark. And the long tail is quite long. So it's like stuff I've never heard of, does many millions of requests a second. Then you get to Netty, which I've heard of. And then you go looking for like Go, and there's Go at 1 million, which is cool. And then you look for Node, and there's Node. And see how long tail just got long? Down here like this. And then it's just like everybody else, right? There's so much random stuff. I think that these are either Docker container names where they've just been auto-generated. Twisted Klein apparently is doing well with Thin Grape coming up just behind it. I have no idea. These are real things, though. But here's the thing. I don't know what's wrong with this person here. Cherry Pie. So we will have CTOs and folks that will look at this benchmark, and they'll say, well, you suck because you're at this level, right? But they don't understand that we are racing Formula One cars against motorcycles, against minivans, right? And if you go into like web forms, and you make a hello world in a web form, and then try to hit it 1 million times, that's a minivan. And that's not what it was meant to do. It was meant to do enterprise text boxes over data applications with an artificial event management system that made stateless HTTP not stateless. That takes a lot of work. And if all you're trying to do is say hello world, that's stupid. You're never going to win with a Tesla going up against a minivan. But then they will do that anyway, and they'll go, that sucks. So what we tried to do with .NET Core was make things modular enough that you could do those kinds of comparisons. With web forms, which was made in 2001, 2002, you got everything, and you removed stuff. With .NET Core, you get nothing. You don't even get an error message page. You don't even get the yellow screen of death. You don't get static file handling. And you have to add everything individually. There were all these articles that were written back in the day about how to harden ASP.NET. And now we've inverted it, and we include nothing by default. And if you added something and screwed up, it's your fault. So we're going to make it so you can go and do plain text benchmarks. And we very much believe, if you go to github/ASP.NET/benchmarks, that we're going to get into the millions of requests a second. Come on, GitHub. Open up some more tabs with GitHub. There we go. Seriously? It still says ASP.NET 5. Do I have access? What? I don't know if I can do a pull request for the thingy. Where's the setting? I don't have settings. I don't have power, do I? I like to do bugs that are like live on stage. I'm pretty sure they don't need the link. I think that they'll figure that out. I've been working really hard for a half an hour, and you applaud for that. That's, that's all good. I'm all right with that. At least I got some kind of applaud, even your pity applause. That's fine. So Kestrel can do with libuv and C# upwards of 2 million requests a second using the tech and power benchmarks. And we're seeing with things like Windows registered I/O almost 6 million. We're not really sure where we're going to get, but in our internal tests, we are seeing numbers in order, around 5 million requests against Node doing around 600,000. And that's cool. And this is going to be us being public and making statements, and hopefully it will usher in some really cool discussions and some really cool optimizations where we raise the water level for everybody. Everyone gets faster. Historically, Microsoft hasn't really done that too much. Now, this is a BS marketing slide that they make me put in, but that is a really cool number right there. 18,000 people outside Microsoft contributing to repositories. That's cool. So this is what .NET looked like in 2015. When we took the GitHub issues and commits and pull requests and said, who cares and where are those people? And here's .NET in 2016. And if we lower our minimum bar about what a contribution is to small changes, it looks like this. So you've got tens of thousands of people now working on .NET and doing cool stuff with it. And in fact, the core FX, the core part of .NET, is about 40% external contributions right now, which is pretty sweet. Make sense? So let me show you some of the stuff that makes me happy about .NET. And again, if you've already seen it and this bores you, I apologize ahead of time. I always make a folder like that. That way I'll know to delete it later, because you don't want that kind of stuff on your desktop. All right. Yeah, it cleans up your crap. Is that a bad word here? Is that like worse than usually bad? I can never tell what's a bad word in Australia. Anything you say could potentially be a bad word. So if I say .NET -- version, right now it's telling me this: preview 3 003180. Okay? Where is .NET today, friends? It's down here, right? And there's a couple of interesting things about where .NET is. It's in the Windows folder. So right off the bat, it's Windows. And remember, how did you get .NET before? Right? There's two ways to get .NET. Upgrade Windows, or really, really want to get the latest version of Paint.NET. Right? Which would then make you go and get whatever the latest. That's how it is, right? When non-technical parent calls, when dad calls and he's like, I really want this Paint program, and they want me to download something called .NET. Oh, screw it. I'll just upgrade your Windows. In the old days, though, we used to ask ourselves, what version of the framework did we have on those machines? And less do we have to think about that, because everyone has .NET now since Windows 7, right? But ultimately, though, it sits in Windows Microsoft .NET, and we are afraid of it. We don't have to be afraid of it, but we are. And it sucks that we're afraid of it, because what happens is, and I see this again and again, is that someone works on an application. Let's say that you're working on 4.5, .NET 4.5. It's an expense reporting app, and it works great, and you deploy it to a server at work, okay? And then let's say that she is doing 4.6.2, writing another app on her own machine, and now she wants to put her app on the same server as your app, and you say, I don't think so. Because you are irrationally afraid of upgrading the machine, because it's going to be 300 megs, it's going to be a reboot, there's going to be downtime, and you are afraid that 4.6.2 will break your 4.5 app, you don't feel like testing it, you can't do side-by-side. Time passes, and then in some future world, we're on another version of .NET. You're the equivalent of .NET 2. She's quit and gone to Node because you won't let her be great and do cool stuff with Link and C#7, right? And you're like, hey, .NET 2 is good enough for me. And that continues, right? People say, well, I'm not really quite sure. I don't want to upgrade till it's baked. And then the next thing you know, 2 versions of .NET goes away. The cool young people doing cool stuff have left for another framework. And we are afraid of .NET. It is a highly compatible upgrade until it isn't, right? Until that one story or that one bit of anecdote that you hear that someone had trouble and it broke their application, and then you're afraid of it. We need to be in a situation where we're not afraid of .NET, and that you can have not only your own private version of .NET, but you can be guaranteed that anything that anyone else does on that machine won't break it. But even more, what if she didn't just have her own version of .NET, she wanted to have a custom forked version of Roslyn, and she has patched versions of ASP.NET, and she added her own features to C#. She should be able to do that, and it should be totally okay. And that's where we get into that blurry line about supported versus allowed versus that's totally awesome that you did that. There's a really great application that Frank Kruger just came out called Continuous. And it's at continuous.codes. I thought it was awesome that we took over a top-level domain. He actually has continuous.codes as his website. It's Visual Studio for your iPad. This is a real thing. And he did it by forking Roslyn, the C# compiler, and getting it to run on an iPad. He wrote the whole thing in F#, and you can literally write C# and get IntelliSense on a freaking iPad. Yeah, it's insane. I'm telling you, it's a real thing. And he did that because of things like being able to fork Roslyn. So we want to enable that ability. But we can't do that when .NET ships with Windows. So where is .NET now? We go back here, and we type in where.net. And I like showing young people, if you have any young people at your work that don't know about how great DOS is, they love PowerShell or whatever, tell them about things like where, little features like that. Or maybe just in the middle of showing them stuff, just throw in a little pop D and a little push D, just to make them kind of keep them wondering. And then just lightly press F7 and then hit escape really quick, so that they're like, what in the? Is that Windows 10? That is Windows 10. It is also DOS 4. And it's awesome. Yeah, seriously, F7. So I'm going to type where.net, and where is it? Right? It's right there. It's not in Windows. It's not even versioned. It's sitting there. Let's go and type .net -- version. We see it's 3180. I'm going to go back over to C program files .net. Go to SDK. And look, there's the tooling, the SDK. we did something weird where we wanted to release .NET. The runtime was good. It was solid. It is released. It is 1.0. But the tooling, the SDK, was holding us back. It's really easy to make a great runtime if there's no UI on top of it. But as soon as you need a property dialog box or something with text boxes over data, and you need to internationalize it and localize it into 20 different languages, then you find the runtime team sitting around waiting for someone to make a dialog box on top of project.json. So we at Microsoft split that. .NET Core is released. It is supported. You call support, they will support you. But the tooling remains in a preview beta stage. Okay? I'm running some daily builds that I went and downloaded. If I just delete those, okay, and then go .NET -- version, I've got that version. And if I go, where's my stuff? There's Minecraft. And restore that stuff and run it again, I've got that. So I just uninstalled and installed .NET or installed and uninstalled .NET. Then I say .NET new, and I've got project.json. Talk about that in a second. And I've got program.cs. I'm going to open up Notepad 2, which is one better than Notepad. And I'm going to go like this. And I'm going to add console.readline. Okay. I'm going to say .NET restore. Can't do it because y'all are watching. That's like npm install or gems or whatever. And now I'm running that app, but I did a console.readline so it would pause right there and hold. Okay. So then I'm going to right-click and hit Task Manager, and I'm going to go looking for .NET, and it's there twice. And Task Manager sucks, so I will close it. And I will go into Process Explorer, where the real work is done. And I will run it as admin, and I will look around for .NET, which is right there. And there's two of them. That first one is the version non-specific one, right? That's the one that thinks about which one to run. Make sense? You see the wheels are going now. So here, .NET -- version is preview 3, right? Okay. I'm going to hit start dot, another thing to show the young people. Type in source. And I'm going to go into source, put in something else, and then I'm going to copy all of this stuff in there. So now I've got a solution-y kind of a thing going on here, right? So then here in that root folder, I'm going to go back to, and by the way, you should always blog because then you can Google yourself later. And I'm going to go and find, because I knew I wrote about this once. Blah, 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 blah. Seriously, if you will just blog twice a week for 15 years, then you will have a really great bunch of stuff. Copy con, global.json, Control-V, Control-Z, .NET -- version. What just happened? Other than the Control-Z kind of thing was awesome, because copy con is bad. This is my version of Emacs, right? Because whenever I watch Emacs people doing that whole thing, because I have a version of Emacs running at home that I don't know how to close, and they're so condescending. They're like, oh yes, Control-Shift-Alt-K, and then you do a little dance, and then it swaps the two lines. I don't know how to do any of that stuff, but I can copy con like a. So I just made a global.json, and I said I'm going to pin the SDK version to a specific version. The one that was sitting there over in project in program files. So if we go back over to here, what if I took one of those versions, I renamed it, and then I went into global.json, Why? What happened? Right? It found the latest one. It did the best that it could. Okay? So you can pin that down to that particular version, and it will find that particular thing. I've completely screwed that up now. What was that? 1.0.preview 3 dash. I can't control Z an admin thing. 3180. That was funny. Yeah, you can't control Z admin stuff. That's why I had to go dig it out of the trash there. Ah! All right. But then if I go out here, I get that. I go in here, I get that. Make sense? Now, we could have just done the easy thing, right, and made it so .NET was versioned, and there'd be a bunch of different ones, but then you wouldn't have Ruby foo, Python foo, .NET foo, and I wouldn't be able to go and take that and put it on a USB key and give it to you on a Mac and have you go .NET restore and have it just work, right? Does that make sense? So you can start doing some really, really cool stuff when you do that. Exactly. So this is a great question. So now John Skeet decides to stress me out, and he says, what happens to this project.json? So remember at the very beginning, and thank you, by the way, for saying that. At the very beginning, I talked about how there's this kind of squishing together of all these different groups. There's 19 different project types. Project.json we all loved, and people liked it because they like curly braces better than angle brackets, because they're curvier and angle brackets are very scary. But the young people like the curly braces. But it was the features in project.json that people liked. But it turns out that we had ASP.NET 5 console app, ASP.NET 5 class library, and that wasn't going to scale. It would mean that we would have to go to 19 different project types and then make them support project.json. We have to make Unity do it, and all the Xamarins, and all the tooling for it. Remember I said how tooling slows us down? But MS Build is open source now and cross-platform and works everywhere. So then we have to ask ourselves, why do we hate MS Build? Why do we hate CS Projes? What do we love about project.json? And can we come up with something that gives us the best of both worlds? And that's what's currently happening. So the idea is that you'll still have a project.json structured looking thing. It will just be called CSProj. It'll be angle brackets instead of curly braces. You'll look at the way that your CSProj files usually look, where it's like element and then another element and then some weird attributes. And it's very hard to merge. And anytime you have any kind of a Git conflict, it's a mess. We'll take some of those elements and make them attributes so that those merge conflicts will happen on just one line. Okay? Suddenly, everyone will be able to go and reference these things. All of the tooling will just light up and just work, right? But we want to be able to still have IntelliSense and being able to bring NuGet packages in and all that kind of stuff. So we're trying to bring those things together. In fact, there was a private email that David Fowler. You think that he went and screwed it up for me? You think he changed it? Why is he even awake? It's like 1 in the morning. I'm looking for Kieran, who talked to David about this thing. That's how I search for stuff. Did I spell Kieran wrong? I know there's a lot more vowels in there. I don't know how to spell Irish names. All right. So so they're working on some ideas here where they list out what do we care about, right? Globbing is cool, swapping packages with projects seamlessly, transitive restores. There's good stuff that they want to be able to do. Those are the things we like about project.json. I don't want people to go and say, oh, I love project.json because curly braces, or because it's just called project.json. That's stupid. There's a project.json file. They are thinking about, they are looking at, what if you could have CS projects that felt and looked, see, John Skeet's smiling, that makes me happy. It's a CS proj, it's an MS build file that looks like a project.json. Yeah, XML, get over it. But by putting includes and versions and stuff like that all on one line. What's that? Yeah, yeah, I mean, you try to make it look nice, right? Did you get any Australian Pokemon today? He really likes Pokemon, and I'm really going to make him hurt as much as possible. Okay, so the point is that we want to preserve that good experience. Okay, so let's do this. Let's go back over to here. I think we got a couple more minutes left. So I'm down here. Let me go up. Desktop. Oh, wrong one. .NET new -t web. So now I've got a web app. .NET restore. Internet in Australia is so good. .NET run. I'm not going to run Edge. Localhost 5000. Okay. I haven't even loaded Visual Studio yet, or Visual Studio Code. I just realized that. That is another kind of a cool thing about this. You know what I mean? Now, some people freak out because they're visual people. They're Visual Studio. They paid for visual. They want the visual in Visual Studio. Literally everything that you're doing here, if you don't want to see text files, you don't like the command line, you don't have to do any of this. That's the tooling. Every single thing that I'm doing, changing project.jsons, messing with this kind of stuff, there'll be a way to do it in a visual way. But what this is about choice. It's about using Emacs or Vim or Notepad or nothing like I'm doing right now. Okay? So this right here is running right there, and it's running in Kestrel. But if I make a change to that file, I'm going to have to go back here and then run it again. Okay? So what I want to do is I'm going to go open up project.json again, and then I'm going to go back to the internet, and I'm going to go .NET watch. Oh, that was weird. .NET watch, which is a tool that I can add. And all I have to do is add this here to the tools section of my project.json. So tools are different than references, right? So go back over here, find the tools section. Here's the tools like Razor and things like that. And I add the .NET watcher. I go back here and I say .NET restore. It says restoring packages. And in a second here, it should say, if I don't have that tool already, restoring packages for tool.NET watcher. Okay? And then instead of saying .NET run, I'm going to say .NET watch. Run. Okay, running .NET, there you go. So now it's running. And I'll go back over here, do a little of this action. So I'm hitting a refresh, and I'm clicking around over here, and stuff's happening on the other side. Okay? But then I'll go into Notepad. Let's go into a controller, like home controller. So I'm here in a home controller, and I hit about. I type in awesome, or I don't know, There you go. I hit save, and the left-hand side just noticed it and recompiled it, and then it runs again. Make sense? Right, so that's the kind of experience. Again, I haven't been in Visual Studio, I haven't been in Visual Studio Code, I haven't been in Emacs, but again, do whatever you want, it's all pluggable, and being able to, like, let's imagine that that's a checkbox in VS, right? Or it's just automatic, like it is. That's the kind of experience that we want to enable. That runs anywhere. Now, there's a longer, more interesting conversation that we can have about how to do things like that cross-platform. Like NTFS has this pub-sub model, so we're actually getting notified of that. But if you look at the code for .NET Watch, there isn't the ability to do that on Linux or on Mac, so it's a polling file watcher. But the experience is the same. So when you go and write code that runs anywhere, you have to think about how your stuff's going to work. And if you're going to be porting code, if you're doing system.drawing, which doesn't exist on a Mac or Linux, or you're doing registry access, or things like that, you've got to ask yourself if that code is going to port. The goal, the direction that we are heading, is hopefully one that looks like this. Because portable class libraries, PCLs, seemed like a good idea at the time, but they were flawed in two major ways. They were lowest common denominator, and they required you to say where you needed it to be portable for ahead of time, which is the exact opposite of what you want when you want portability. You don't know. You want to make it portable just because. But you had to go into a checkbox and say, I want it to work on Silverlight and Xbox and Windows, and that was not cool. And additionally, it was a lowest common denominator, so it was basically simple data types and simple structures and lists of stuff. What we want is a standard library so that you, as C# and F# developers, don't feel like, oh, I got to learn Mono now. Oh, I got to learn .NET Core now. Oh, I got to learn .NET Full Framework now. You'll learn the .NET Standard Library, just like we learned the BCL 10, 15 years ago. And then the other frameworks that sit on top of that are the thing that you learn. But really cool innovation can happen here. And because we've open sourced the compilers and the languages are moving forward, when new things like string inference and new C# 7 isms or F# 4.1 isms happen, it goes all the way up and everybody gets that great experience. Does that make sense? So I think it's a pretty decent time to be a developer. Let's do 5 or 10 minutes of Q&A and see if this talk was any good. You're either shocked or just bored senseless. Over here.
It's all about the binding of the versions. So you say you bound your application or your folder to the global version of a particular .NET, right?
I was in that instance, I was changing the version of the SDK, which changed the version of the driver, which is separate from changing the version of the runtime that I would change in project.json. So global JSON, SDK.
The global JSON. So when you bound to a particular version, what happens if that version doesn't exist, for instance?
In that particular instance, today, it would have picked the newest one.
So you just fall back to whatever.
That would be, and that's the kind of thing where, like, from a community perspective, if you think it ought to break, if that SDK isn't available, then you should, we should talk about that as a community and have those kind of discussions. Right now, I tested it. It picks the latest one, which is an interesting choice. Good question. Behind you there on the right.
When you installed the .NET Watch and you updated the JSON file, are there any plans to make that available in the command line, like an npm install?
Like an npm install.
Yeah, so
it is available at the command line. It is a .NET tool. If I go out to the command line right now, and I say, I don't know how to type, and I say .NET Fred, you see how it says no executable matching the command .NET-Fred? A .NET tool can be anything that is named a certain way. It can be PowerShell, it could be Bash script, it could be NPM or whatever.
Yeah, I meant how you had to install the tool and then do a .NET restore. You updated the JSON file first.
Right. I updated the JSON file first because you're asking me if I wanted to do what's the equivalent of npm --g?
Not. I guess it could be a --g or a save dev or
No, like it's right now everything is local to the project. I said .NET Restore.
No,
I could go NuGet install and pull it out manually.
No, so in Node, for
What am I
example,
missing?
you'd do an npm install watch -- save dev.
Oh, can I update the project JSON via the command line?
Yeah.
It is yes, pardon me, I understand now. It is the intent that, yes, you'll be able to do that. So we're not going to do that on project.json because we're moving to the CS proj. But the intent is that you should, if you don't want to, you should never have to open up a text file and edit something like that. So yes, pardon me, you would be able to do some gesture, .NET tool add .NET watcher.tools, and it would show up in the CS proj. Yes, that is the intent. I don't know what the exact spec is for, but those conversations happen in the public on GitHub. Sorry for my confusion. Good question. Yeah. Yeah, I like editing text files, but I totally get that you don't want to have to do that. You just want to be able to run it and have it get done.
So moving from the project.json file back to CS proj, what's happening with the global.json? We see
it'll be some kind of
solution file.
It'll be some kind of cleaner, better solution file format.
Cool.
Yeah. No one likes these formats, and we want to have something that is. And by the way, there are features of MS Build that haven't been exposed in Visual Studio. So think about, for example, one of the big changes of project.json was switching from being include all to exclude some, right? So with CS projes, it sucks because every single file has to have a line. And then when you have multiple teams and somebody changes something, then it's conflict, right? Project.json says, nope, everything gets added by default, and then you just exclude the stuff you don't want. That's been supported in CS proj and MS Build, and anyone who's written custom MS Builds for years. It's just that it was never expressed in Visual Studio. So it didn't get seen. Because again, runtimes are easy and tooling is complicated. So globbing, that exists as well, but again, no tooling for it. So yeah, the intent is that a CS proj will be much, much smaller if it doesn't include a bill of lading of all of the crap that it needs, and instead uses globbing and excludes instead. Cool, good questions. Cool? Somewhat useful? Appreciate it, it's okay? Thank you. Yeah.
Is the old .NET framework going to die?
Is the old .NET framework going to die? No, absolutely not. Do you know that you can run VisiCalc on Windows 10? Seriously. I have a Mac at home that is on Snow Leopard because it was on a certain processor type, and then one day Apple just said, no, and it's been stuck there as like a bug in amber, just frozen like Jurassic Park for the last 10 years. It runs just fine, but it can never, ever move forward. Microsoft is really, really good on backward compatibility.
I tried to run Edlin earlier on and it didn't work.
Edlin didn't work? Well, we'll file a bug immediately. Does Edlin even exist anymore? Can we go in GW Basic? Does that? Well, I want to get on those things right away. We'll get that handled. No, but seriously though, no, the .NET framework, the full framework continues. If you take a look just at 4.6.2, it wasn't just a series of bug fixes. It was a lot of stuff. .NET 4.6.2 blog. This was just 2 days ago. We had updates to click once. We had updates to high DPI and having individual monitor DPI stuff for WPF. So, work continues. Additionally, remember that .NET Core is a server-side thing, right? If you're going to be doing stuff at WPF or WinForms, which still there are millions and millions of projects being done for them, you're going to be using .NET Framework. And it's worth pointing out that Roslyn underlies all of this stuff. So when Roslyn gets better, .NET Full Framework gets better. When F# gets better, everything gets better. So yeah, I would say that it might slow down, but it's not dead, no. And even if it was, it'd still be supported for 20 years. There's a question over there. Oh, we still support VB6, that's true. That must make you happy. We got one over here? Yeah.
Yes. So we understand that .NET Core has been here for more than 15 years, and .NET Framework.
Yeah, sure.
And then .NET Core, which is actually cross-platform, will be running only the Mac or Linux. Yeah. So does it mean that .NET Core, which is running on Linux, will not have all the capability of .NET Framework that we have now?
Yeah.
But is there in near future or far future, is there a possibility that .NET Core will have all the capability that .NET Framework now.
Okay, so the gentleman is asking the question about, well, core core means to like pare something down to its essence. .NET Core has less stuff, less surface area, less methods available. You're never going to see Windows PF on Linux, right? So you're not going to see WPF for .NET Core running on Linux. That just doesn't make any sense. Windows Forms, not going to go to Linux. But as far as surface area of the base class libraries, I think that you're going to see those kinds of libraries get raised up, but you're also going to see .NET standard libraries that make functionality available in both places. Those .NET standard libraries will work in .NET Core and on full framework. Will you be able to do the exact same stuff? It depends on what people ask for. But remember that the focus is server-side, cloud, density. Those are the things that .NET Core is meant for. The full framework is meant for what it does today. So
surprises me that it's for server-side stuff. And we were just saying .NET Core for server-side stuff, but also for IoT and mobile.
Yeah.
So it's sort of the bottom and the top.
Yeah, John Skeet makes a really good point that .NET Core didn't just pop out of nowhere, right? There's some historical stuff where it came from some of the CLR work that was done in Windows Phone and in Silverlight to make a tiny CLR. So it is a parallel fork that has many, many years of history in it to be an optimized modern version of the CLR, modernized Jitter, modernized GC, and it runs, again, on a Raspberry Pi. Yeah, couple more questions?
When the .NET Framework team or developers do their work and they want to add a new feature to the .NET Framework, do they have to actually code it twice now? One for the actual framework and one for core?
No, so you can make a library that works in both places. You can code it once. You can make a NuGet package that can do cross-compilation. So like, for example, if I added JSON.NET, which is like the canonical example everyone uses, that NuGet package is one thing. It's Newtonsoft.json. But if you look in it, there are versions of that to run anywhere. And the NuGet or Visual Studio will automatically do the right thing and say, oh, I see you're writing a UWP app for Xbox. Or, oh, I see you're doing this in Xamarin on Unity or Mono on Unity. And he wrote the code once. He may have some if-defs to keep track of whether he's running on this version or that version. But no, you don't have to write the code multiple times. You may have to test it multiple times, but you don't have to write it multiple times. What
about the BCL developers? Are they doing double the work now?
Well, so the BCL, when we say the BCL, the base class library, that's .NET Full Framework. And that's having small additions, incremental additions like we just saw in 4.6.2. Core FX, which are those broken apart, it's almost like the BCL as expressed in a series of NuGet packages. And then the surface area of the .NET Standard Library. If we add a bunch of stuff to that, we're going to version that. And there'll be .NET Standard Library 2.0 and 2.1 and things like that. I didn't get a lot of time to talk about the .NET Standard Library. But is anyone familiar with how Android does API levels? Right? There's like 68 million versions of Android. But you don't think about that when you're developing, or you try not to. You say, I want API level 15. And I know it will run on these things. The same thing will apply with .NET Standard. You'll say, I want .NET Core App 1.0, which is a meta package of packages. And that implements, or allows me to implement, rather, .NET Standard 1.5. And right now we're working on 2.0 for later. That will include more stuff. So that bigger and bigger surface area means that more and more devices get more and more functions. That's going to be like an API level. And then when you pick one, if you want to make things run anywhere, like Windows 7, you might have to go back in time and say, I want .NET Standard Library 1.2 so that I might support Windows XP or Windows 7 or whatever. Okay? And if you want to learn about the .NET Standard Library and all that kind of stuff, there is a really good document right there where he talks about it. I think we're out of time. Cool? All right, thanks, y'all.